Sports fans, today is Sunday, May 7th. This is Celtics Beat on the CLNS Media Network, and I am Coach Nick. You in? Greetings, everybody. Welcome to episode number 208 of Celtics Beat. And I'm Coach Nick of B-Ball Breakdown, filling in for Larry H. Russell. And I'm pleased to bring on the show today Candace Buckner, who is the Washington Post sports reporter who covers the Wizards. And Candace, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Coach Nick.
It's weird to be on a different platform talking to you, but nonetheless, I might not ask you if you're in, but we'll have a similar conversation. And we got to jump out and talk a little bit about Celtics and the Wizards. I'm kind of curious to hear your take on this. I've heard a lot of Celtics opinions these days. How do you feel after Game 3?
I feel that the Wizards really are evenly matched with the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. And even after they fell into an 0-2 hole, I felt that there were enough signs to show that this team, the Wizards, can play with the Celtics. Not only because, they split the regular season, each team, protecting their home court. So no team has won on the other end. But also, if you remember both games in Boston, the Wizards set up huge leads in the first quarter, great jumps, and it's difficult to play in TD Garden because those fans are so passionate and so into it. I remember in Game 1 when they started off 16-0, there was some agitation, I guess, in the stands, but then you started hearing those "Let's go Celtics" chants because they were desperate to pull their team out of the lump. So long answer short, I feel like what they did in games 1 and 2, they were able to put all together in game 3, get off to that big lead, but also maintain it. And that's something they didn't do in Boston. So I think they're evenly matched. My prediction beforehand was this series was going to go seven games. And after Thursday night's game, I still believe that.
I hear you loud and clear, and it definitely felt like, and I'm wondering what they were saying in the Wizards locker room, but certainly coming back home down 0-2, I would imagine no one was really hanging their head and feeling very bad about that because of what you said. It seemed like, they felt like it was just a couple plays here or there, and they could have easily been at least 1-1, right? Right.
I mean, especially in Game 2, when not only did they have a big early lead, they had a big late lead, and they lost it. But, you kind of waste John Wall's 40-13 game as Isaiah scored 53. So on Thursday, even though Bradley Beal didn't have like a great shooting game, the way that he started was huge, and he scoring the seven opening points for the Wizards. It showed that he had his three, he had his aggression, and he was setting the tone. I'm sorry, not Oubre, but we'll get to Oubre, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But Otto Porter, the other junior, Otto Porter Jr., he had a great first quarter, and finally they got some consistent scoring off the bench with Bojan Bogdanovic. I think the big thing with him is he probably needs to play a lot more with the starters because there's just not a lot of spacing happening on that second unit. So whenever he gets an opportunity to play with Brad and with John, he's going to be able to cook.
That's a really great point and worthy of looking at the lineup data to see how he does with those guys because I think the Celtics fans probably want to put their hands on their hips and say, he ain't going to score 19 points again in a playoff game. What would your response be to that?
I would say not so fast, my friend. I think Scott Brooks has to get really creative and send him on maybe as the sixth man just as he did in Game 3. And I only say that with Bojan. He has the potential to score. I mean, this is not like, oh my gosh, that's this is like the biggest game he's going to have. He has the potential to break it out. When he first got here, got to Washington after the trade, he started off kind of easy enough, couple games in the teens, But then he had a couple games in which and back to back 27, 29, and he was shooting and he was making a crazy amount of threes. So when he's on, he can be a guy that, I'm not going to say 19 all the time, but he's definitely going to get you in the double digits. And I think he's going to make multiple threes, which gives them a third shooter. And sometimes I would even put him over Otto Porter.
Interesting. Wow. I mean, because Otto Porter, was a revelation. And let's get to him. I've actually been waiting for him to break out since he started in the league. And, when he is going like that. What's that?
You've been waiting a long time then.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, he's finally, those legs were really skinny coming out of college. He looked like he needed to eat a little bit. And now, look, he's kind of blossoming. So this is, I don't know. Are you surprised that he was able to be that strong, like in the thick of the second round of the playoffs? Or is this enough what you've seen this year that led you to believe, he was going to be able to do it under the high pressure stuff?
Well, I see these guys only under the scope of the 2016, 2017 season, because that's this is my first year with them. So I actually thought he would be able. I thought he would kind of break out in the playoffs, and that really hasn't happened because after All-Star break, he went into All-Star break leading the league in 3-point field goal percentage, and then trailed off. I had a couple games really out of the gates early where his shot was wonky, kind of got back to it a little bit, but never really had the stroke or took the shots that he had, for those first 50 or so games. And I thought, okay, well, maybe after a few games off, and, he did kind of go into the postseason a bit banged up, but he had a couple days off. I figured, he'll be rejuvenated. That didn't happen immediately. He didn't take through the Atlanta series, the most shots that he took was 10. And to me, he is their number 3 option, no doubt, especially when you look at that Atlanta series when Markieff Morris was so foul play. And Marcin Gortat was kind of a non-factor offensively. So for him to be so limited, and I think he was limiting himself too. I was a little surprised that he didn't come with more force in the playoffs. But Thursday, 8 of 13, he did miss all his threes, but 19 points and 8 rebounds, 3 steals, great. That's a great performance out of Otto.
For sure. And that one of those really big X factors for the Wizards. And, the thing with the Celtics has plagued them all year long has been rebounding issues. They play small. Horford hasn't been as effective as they'd like him to be down there. However, in the first round, they were able to kind of play even and really, not get out rebounded by a lot against in the first round. So the question now is game 3, for instance, they got out rebounded 50-38. What are you seeing on that down low that's giving them the Wizards such a big advantage?
Well, Gortat, stepped up, and when they go small, as he said in his post game press conference, I've got to dominate. So he realized his advantage. The only thing is, those first 2 games, strangely enough, even when Boston was going small, they were beating the Wizards on the offensive glass, and to me that was a surprise. And that Morris was slightly hobbled because of the injury, but I thought they still would have that advantage, and it wasn't until game 3 when Gortat, who's again for the second straight series at times will be the only true center on the court. And so at those times, he has to.
Sure.
I was trying to find a way to say, live up to his words, but I guess I can't be that clever right now. But he has to, live up to his words and, dominate when they go small.
Yeah. Now, here's another problem, though, because it seems like the matchup with him guarding Horford is a little bit difficult for him because Horford wants to try and space the floor and get behind the 3-point line. So are the Wizards talking about that at all, or are they just happy with Horford, even though he's shooting out of his mind from back there? Are they just willing to let him take those?
I I would imagine they will allow that more so than letting Isaiah go off. And it's funny because before Game 3, Scott Brooks half jokingly said, we tried everything against Isaiah except we haven't tried a triple team. LOL, ha ha ha. Well, after Game 3, and it is funny that Isaiah mentioned, they had 3 guys on me at times. Well, if 3 guys has to stop little Isaiah Thomas, then so be it. And I think they will give the Jay Crowder threes. They will give the Al Horford threes. Try to take those percentages, but get the ball out of Isaiah Thomas's hands.
Right. I mean, that seems to be a lot easier said than done. Are you seeing anything that's interesting that the Celtics are trying to run to kind of get Isaiah open a little bit more, or to avoid that? Because clearly until Game 3, they haven't been able to do anything to stop him.
Yeah, there were just a couple of times I just remember it was just so intelligent. In Game 2, if Markieff Morris is going to be on that floor, and that he was just cleared moments before the game after a sprained ankle, and if he's going to be on that floor, test the man out. And for them to get so many switches for Isaiah Thomas to get on Markieff Morris, that's a nightmare for him on any day, let alone a day when your ankle is bothering you. That wasn't the case in Game 3, but that action from Brad Stevens and just the Celtics, just extremely smart. Get those mismatches because Isaiah Thomas will win that 90% of the time.
And something else you'll win 100% of the time is making food delivered right to your door from our friends over at Blue Apron. They're like the Boston Celtics of fresh ingredient and recipe delivery services. Number 1. Just like a good NBA team, you need chemistry, and that's what cooking is, both with the preparation of their fresh, high-quality ingredients and by bringing your family together to cook. I just prepared Parmesan-crusted chicken, and it had me using oh-so-tasty fromage blanc. That's right, I'm speaking French. And these meals cost less than $10 per person, delivered right to your door with the exact amount of food pre-measured for you, and you'll never see a repeat recipe for a whole year. Head over to blueapron.com/CoachNick, and you'll get your first 3 meals absolutely free. Even the shipping is free. It's like KYRIE nailing a 3 to finish the comeback last year. Only you just need to type in blueapron.com/CoachNick instead. Much less pressure here, sports fans. So check out our friends over at Blue Apron today and begin a life of culinary fulfillment. Wait, did I leave the oven on? Now, since you brought it up, is there any truth to the rumor that Marcus Morris played for Markieff in that game because he looked so spry on that really bad ankle?
I totally probably led to the conspiracy theory in the post game press conference. I asked John, so what did you guys get from Markieff today? And I totally mistake, but apparently Smooth, I guess that's what Marcus calls Markieff. Apparently Smooth is a tough dude and just played through it. So
all right, so we shouldn't read anything. The fact that his brother was in the stands watching the game, the first game, and then all of a sudden was not around for the game 2.
Where's Marcus? Right. I would be shady enough if I was in the Wizards. I would absolutely be shady enough to send Marcus out there. But apparently they're playing by the rules, and Markieff just seems to be a tough dude.
Yeah, I agree, and he was a tough dude. And I don't know what he could have done against that one. One of my tweets that went viral with that video of him. Not only was it that did he cross him over and then pull up, and that's the hardest part because the crossover is one part, but you got to hit the shot. Like he still had to hit the 17-18 footer, and then the fact that he stared at him the whole way down.
The whole way.
And even more so, and I have no doubt that Markieff knew that he was being stared at, even though he wouldn't even look at him. You know what I mean?
That's like a hidden talent of NBA players. Dennis Schroeder did that a couple times in the first round. Just their ability to act like they are not being mean mugged for 94 feet. That is really good. John Wall even said what the F you trying to do, boy, something like that. You can read his lips and exactly what he said. But Dennis Schroeder was skillfully ignoring that gaze. That's kudos to basketball players.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot going on, I think, between those two, and maybe you can fill us in a little bit because, I mean, I know Isaiah. He's a really nice guy, and he's pretty, mellow in that respect. I mean, he's a bulldog, but he's mellow, and I know that there was some point where there was, I believe it was Markieff kind of pushed him away. Do you know what that was all about? Isaiah was trying to go over to the bench of the Wizards or something like that?
Okay, I didn't see, that whole replay, but just knowing that through a regular season of heated battles, the teams don't like each other. Okay, we'll start with that. And how Markieff started the game by shoving Al Horford into the crowd, and that was his retaliation because he believed that Al Horford likely stepped under his foot and caused the sprained ankle. But the play before the double technicals between Markeith and Isaiah. Isaiah had inadvertently caused Otto Porter's nose to bloody, and so that caused some riffraff. And 6'10" Markieff Morris decided to get into the mug of Isaiah Thomas.
It's funny because it reminds me of, Isaiah wanted to give a high five to maybe like CP3, and then his teammate at the time, Boogie, was like yanking him around. It's like he's just a pinball out there. I would suspect that Isaiah might have gone over there to say, hey, I'm sorry, because the thing with Isaiah is the closer you are to him and you're trying to defend him, his head is so much lower than everybody else's, right? It's just going to end up, getting a huge momentum before it connects with something, and it's unfortunate, but I think that he's probably used to that.
Right. And how tall is he really? And I haven't really. 5'9". He cannot be 5'9".
Yeah, it's funny because I interviewed him and I did a little joke. And this is back when he was in Sacramento, and I'm 6 feet. I'm looking down on him. I mean, he's not 5'9". He's probably like 5'8" or something like that, or something. But again, and it's just even more. He's more impressive than any other. And maybe we could talk about this for a second. I actually tweeted it out and got a lot of crap on Twitter where I'm actually more impressed by the way he scores than a guy like Iverson. Now Iverson was taller. I mean, right? He was legit like 6 feet, I think. Right? I mean, I never stood next to him.
Iverson had the special sauce, the crossover, the major dribbling skills, and according to Fred Hoiberg, Mr. Thomas is up here carrying every time he touches the ball. But I think maybe Iverson just had that woo factor. Like every time he touched the ball, it was like something, he was going to do something with it.
Right. Yeah, and my take on it is that, he's okay, so he's already shorter. There's no question he's shorter. Doesn't jump nearly as high. And that was obviously one thing that was amazing about Iverson was that he was an athlete. He could really get off the floor, but he wasn't very efficient. And, Isaiah Thomas is much more efficient than him. I got to check the numbers, but certainly looking in these playoffs and what he's doing now, he is. And I don't know. It's just that, I guess it doesn't take anything away from AI necessarily, but it's just I am more impressed by that guy. And probably more impressed than Muggsy Bogues. And then, oh my God, who won the dunk contest?
Nate Robinson?
Oh, no, Nate too, but no, I'm going way farther back.
Oh, Spud Webb?
Spud Webb, my gosh, thank you.
Can
those guys.
Isaiah dunk?
What's that?
Can Isaiah dunk? I haven't really noticed his lift.
Yeah, I don't think so. I would be surprised if he could dunk, but some of those guys are crazy hops too. But he doesn't look like he could. He doesn't need it, by the way. That's the other thing. So are the Wizards just like? Are they frustrated when they're trying to guard? What are some of the quotes that you're hearing about trying to guard this guy and what they can try and do to stop him?
Be more physical. And I think they were able in Game 3, and they need to carry that over tonight, of just touching him, making sure that their presence is felt, So get away with being more physical. And I think, just the NBA playoff adage is, whoever strikes first, whoever shows that they're the aggressor first, they kind of get away with more stuff. I kind of doubt, considering what happened in Game 3, man, it's an 8 p.m. start, and the whistles will probably stall this game into the point of boredom because it's going to be heavily officiated. But you have to be physical with Tony Parker. And again, it sounds cliche, but the best defense on Isaiah is making him play defense. And a couple of times they got Otto Porter on got him on the post. So if they're trying to hide him on the quote unquote, just wing guy who just spot up and shoot, well, that wing guy has to do more than just spot up. He has to take him down to the post. He has to make him work.
Yeah, I've been saying earlier on other shows that the fear of an offense that wants to go after like a smaller point guard, that the problem you might have is that all of a sudden you have a point guard on your team that's like posting up, it never normally posts up, and now everyone's sort of misconfigured on the court, and it oftentimes doesn't work. But it definitely looked pretty good for Wall, right? Like he was trying to back him down, and they were forcing double teams. And, is that like, Wall doesn't post up that much in the regular season, it didn't look like to me, but how comfortable do you feel like he is down there doing that?
Yeah, he hasn't posted up that much. I mean, I remember a few times, but going back to the first round series, there were some times when they had practices and John Wall was the last person on the court practicing some back down moves. And, of course, that was to try to abuse Dennis Schroeder. I didn't see that too often in the first round series, but that's at least part of his repertoire when he wants to break it out. And I know it's not something that they can just rely on, but every now and then, if Isaiah is going to guard John Wall, why not try it?
Yeah, absolutely. And if they can force those double teams, depending on who's guarding him, like that's going to really help. Guys like Porter, and then even you're right. If they get a chance to get Bogdanovic in there with those guys, and him as well. So I'm also curious. Like, is it as startling to you when you're down there live, seeing John Wall push the ball off the dribble down the court as fast as he goes?
I would say absolutely, especially. During that one play, and I just don't understand how he's able to have the control, the body control, presence of mind, and the athleticism. Game 3 against the Hawks, he grabs a rebound or gets the outlet pass and full breakneck speed down the court, eludes Schroeder with the behind-the-back dribble or going around the world, and that wasn't just for show. That was necessary. And in the same motion, get ready to take off and slam it home. That's a play you don't see every day. And even when I wasn't covering the Wizards, I just remember thinking, I used to cover the Pacers when the Pacers played the Wizards. I just remember thinking, like, oh my gosh, he really is that fast.
Yeah, and I asked him about that too, and he just sort of shrugged and was like, "I didn't train any particular way, and I happen to be fast." But sometimes when he does do that behind the back, it really ends up being like the best way to attack the hoop and not get stripped. And it's I think that as the new fundamentals take hold in the NBA and trickle down, I mean, we're going to probably start seeing that more, and that's why I know it looks fancy and it is fancy, and he's that good to pull it off. But a lot of times, it really is the only way to do it. And, I just want to interrupt here for 1 second to make sure everybody here knows that CLNS Radio on YouTube, CLNS Media on the YouTube channel, is doing these really great raw and uncut videos from the locker room with the interviews with the coaches and the players from both teams. And if you want to check that out, if you're, Celtics fans would love this kind of stuff, it's right from, the locker room, then check out the YouTube channel with CLNS Media. And you'll get your fill and more over there. And anyway, and Candace, you're no stranger to that locker room. I have to imagine, is the interest for this series more than it was? Do you see like more reporters and more hype than you did in the first round?
I would say so, but considering the Celtics have a large contingent, and even on one of the off days, you'll see a lot from CSN, New England, and Boston Globe, Boston Herald, and all the other outlets. So I would say for sure. I mean, there are only 8 teams remaining, but you add in a major market like Boston, and there's so much attention on the Celtics in that market. It's just a great sports city, plain and simple. So it's crowded these days.
Yeah,
Nick.
I can imagine. Well, let's talk about, Game 4, tonight's game, because, we got a little bit of taste here. You mentioned you think it's going to be chippy, And it's also a strange start time in theory for a Sunday, although I don't know if the players' bodies notice days like that. Usually they play, like a 3 o'clock game or a 5 o'clock game on a Sunday. So,
right.
Aside from the officiating, which I agree, I think it's going to be – I would hope that they would come in and call a couple fouls in the beginning and tell these players what's up, and that'll be it. But I don't know if it's going to work. But what else do you see? What are some of the intriguing things that you might see that we're looking for in these matchups coming up?
And you know what? I'm totally tripping, Nick. It is a 6:30 p.m. start Eastern Standard Time. I had to, finally book a flight and hotel for Game 5, and so 8 p.m. start was on my mind there. All right,
okay,
so
good. Well,
getting that out of the way. Correcting myself. What was the question again?
So the question is, if we set aside like the chippiness and the referee stuff, which we'll expect to see, what are some of the intriguing, matchup stuff that we should be looking at that the teams want to control? All
right, Bradley on Bill, and I love saying that. Avery Bradley on Bradley Bill. Bradley Bill still hasn't had like a great consistent stretch where his shot has matched, and he has a funny quote from the first series. My rhythm was good, my shot sucked. So his shot has not matched his rhythm. And he's still playing out there. That massive flop he took in Game 3, hey, he was still engaged. But he hasn't had a consistent stretch where his shot, he's looked like what they call him, Baby Ray, as in Baby Ray Allen. And when you're playing typically against Avery Bradley, and he's the one who likes to touch, and he's the one that likes to get your hands on him, gets his hands on you and make sure that you feel him. That's going to be difficult. But of course, the Wizards do not want to go to Boston in a 3-1 hole, and I think that matchup, Bradley Bill, has to have more than just that 7-point spurt. Has to do a little bit more offensively. They really didn't need him in Game 3 because they got so much from Otto and Bojan and, of course, Wall. And 13 points from Marcin Gortat. It's pretty big. But I'm curious to see if Bradley Bill can kind of figure out, his game against one of the best perimeter defenders in the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's shooting okay, but certainly from behind the line, he's really struggling.
Right, exactly.
And that's where you're going to get it when you're off rhythm, and he's just got you a little bit off, and you're rushing to try and get the shot off when you feel like you're open. So that is a very intriguing matchup as well, and I'm going to be watching for that too. Before we get to a couple of the other interesting things about these the chippiness that I want to talk about, the 22-0 run in the first quarter that basically ended the game in Game 3. Were the Wizards aware that, like, other than that little run, it was an even game?
Good point. I don't know if they were asked about that. Everything was over the ejection and the technicals overshadowing much of that, but they were just pleased that they were able to get out to a good start and maintain it. But no, that's an excellent point.
Yeah, I mean, if I were the Celtics, I'd be looking at that and saying, okay, we had and by the way, the Celtics had some pretty good shots, especially in the very first half of that run where they just kind of missed them. And you make a couple of those, and maybe that run doesn't get so bad. But like after that, it was almost even, like a couple points either way. And, I would almost think that would be cause for the Celtics to say, well, hey, just like the Wizards felt like, we know we're down 2-0, but that was close. The Celtics were kind of right there as well. So, again, I think what we're trying to say is that this is going 7 games, right?
Right. And even in that 22-0 run, Isaiah Thomas scored 0. Of course, in that 22. In a 22-0 run, Isaiah Thomas scored 0. Of course he didn't, but he wasn't a factor is what I'm saying. He didn't score until late in the first quarter when he got to the free throw line. So I don't, everybody's going to have a bad game in the playoffs, and I don't suspect Isaiah will, basically have to get on the board late in the first quarter with a free throw come Game 4.
Yeah, and it was a very strange game. I mean, the game kind of like everyone kind of looked like they gave up. Like midway through the third quarter, like, okay, it's a blowout. We're just going to go on to Game 4. But although some people didn't give up, Brandon Jennings didn't want to give up, even though they were up, and he seemed to be instigating. And so I was really, really critical of him. I thought that his energy was almost like manic and sort of misplaced. Even in the other games too, he just seemed to kind of come out, and I just wasn't responding well to how his energy and his body language and all those things. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts were on the whole Rozier, incident and how that played out.
Yeah, for some reason, well, that's his matchup. But for some reason, Brandon Jennings going after a second-year player. That's the way that he feels that he can impact the game, try to change things. But at that point, the atmosphere had already been changed by, Kelly Oubre's charge on Olynyk. But, that's just part of Brandon's game. It could be pesky, it's annoying. He could be a troll. But, when it's working, the Wizards will live with it.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I just thought it was weird because they were up by 20, and the kind of place where you want to get in someone's head, usually it's like what Olynyk did, like you set a hard screen, or that kind of thing. And this was like, usually when you step up to somebody, it's because you're the one who got fouled, and you're not happy with how hard the foul was, but instead he stepped up to him. But apparently there is some history, right? Going back into the regular season, I feel like I was reading something a bit between Rozier and Jennings that I'm blanking on. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
It must have been when he was with the Knicks, because I need to. They played one game. I'm sorry, Brandon only played one of the series games.
Yes. That definitely sounds even more familiar now that I'm thinking about it. So yeah. Now let's talk about the Oubre thing then, because. What did you feel? Did anybody on the Wizards, or do you feel like it was excessively dirty and trying to hurt somebody?
Olynyk?
Yeah.
Well, after the game, of course, Scott Brooks was watching his words, but he said several things that stood out. We're just trying to play basketball, making sure that he puts the emphasis that the Wizards are trying to play basketball, and that leaves you room to interpret that are the Celtics now playing basketball. He also said that the refs made the right call on that play, considering that they called that screen illegal. There were other times when I know that he's referring to that Olynyk got his hands up onto Kelly. Like upper body, maybe even above the neck, and got his hip out or got his shoulder out. And it's those little touch plays that where you put in some extra stuff on it, and that's what he was referring to. And also, Brooks said that I don't think he should have reacted that way, but I understand why he reacted that way. So obviously, they think that Olynyk was doing some extra stuff.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, he's got a little bit of a history, and I'm not so sure. I feel like maybe it's because he's Canadian or something, or the man bun. It doesn't strike me as dirty, because dirty to me is premeditated and like really the intent to injure, and like hip or whatever, that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's like I'm going out there to take that guy out. Like I don't feel that necessarily, but I mean I could be wrong. But it sounds like at the very least the Wizards are like are raising an eyebrow at it, huh?
Right, for sure, and. It's because he's Canadian. But he has a history, Nick, as you know. So I don't know.
No worries. Well, I think let's talk about how this series is going to play out beyond Game 4, because we will have at least 5 games, and I imagine it goes longer. So if it goes to 7 games, let's just say, who are you picking?
With home court advantage, I would say. Boston would be the choice. Home court, neither team has won on the other court so far, and man, they're just a different team inside TD Garden.
Yeah. I've noticed that the only way the Celtics are going to beat the Wizards is outscoring them. That's kind of what it feels like. They don't really have any defense to hang their hat on. And that's the only thing that gives me pause about the Celtics, even about can they actually do that? Because it's a little bit, from a coach's perspective, a little scary to say to have to rely on that, right? Like I don't know if I'm going to get like the 4 stops in a row I'm going to need in the fourth quarter of one of these games. And so, would you agree with me? It's safe to say that the Wizards probably have more like overall talent on the basketball court. That's fair?
Yeah, but I still think the Celtics may have more depth, and whatever they're getting out of those bench guys when Olynyk or Rozier, or if they put Johnson into the rotation, just sometimes I just feel like they get more out of their bench guys than the Wizards get out of their 6 through 9.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure Brad Stevens would recognize Amir Johnson anymore the way this is going. So we'll see if he even has an impact at all in the rest of the series. But it's certainly been really entertaining. I think it's my favorite second round series of all of them. I mean, we got a couple that are going to be sweeps probably, so that doesn't count. But nonetheless, this has been really an intriguing series. Any final thoughts you leave us with as we wrap up?
I just hope that the referees definitely contain the game. No silliness, but not take over. Because I feel like too often in the Atlanta series, especially after guys start talking about MMA and double MMA, the whistles took over the game. So yeah. I would just love a great, nasty, hard-fought playoff game without too much influence from the referees.
Oh, I agree. That would be terrific, and hopefully they send the right crew that can handle it, and we get a good, clean, solid game. The rest of the series would be great.
Right.
So, well, Candace, thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget this is Candace Buckner, who writes for the Washington Post as a sports reporter covering the Wizards. Candace, where do we find you on Twitter?
I am at Candace B, as in dog, Buckner.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on the show and offering your insider insights. It was fantastic stuff, and I know the Celtics fans are going to get a real treat out of getting the other perspective on this one. So we'll wait to see what happens tonight in the big game. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. Once again, I'm Coach Nick of B-Ball Breakdown, which you should check out my channel as well. We have a great podcast and some really great videos. In fact, we did one on Isaiah traveling after Hoiberg had called him out, which has gotten a lot of runs. So check that out if you can over at B-Ball Breakdown. And again, it's Coach Nick filling in for Larry H. Russell. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.